everyone. Welcome to the very first episode of It's a Lot, Let's Talk, the official Caredara podcast. I'm Kylie Cameron, Chief Operating Officer at Caredara. I'm a gerontologist by profession, and I have years of experience in the home care field.
And my name's JP Attell. I'm the CEO of Caredara, and I have human resource, workforce development, and a tech background.
So, we wanted to start this podcast to talk about the real moments behind care, the ones that don't always show up in brochures or schedules, the late night worries, the unexpected phone calls, the quiet guilt, the pressure to hold it all together, because care is a lot. We're here to talk honestly about what care actually looks like today, not just the ideal version, the real one. And why conversations we need most often happen too late.
Yeah, and I think if you can picture for a moment like a hospital discharge, a fall, a caregiver who hasn't slept, or even a senior who says, I don't want to be a burden. And, you know, care never really starts calmly. There's always a crisis behind it because I think, care is always needed, but it's never predictable. And that's the unfortunate part about it. Um, and I think most systems assume or base themselves on the assumption that care is predictable, when in fact we know it isn't. And I have a personal experience with that with my own mother, bringing her to the hospital and realizing for the first time when the emergency doctor said, you know, if we send your mother home, is there anyone to take care of her? And we knew at that moment there wasn't. She was living on her own. She was quite independent up until that time. She was having a few issues and things that were cropping up that obviously led us to wondering what was going on. And then when she was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, she continued to live on her own because she was capable of doing so. But we knew at some point in the future it was going to change. And when we brought her to the hospital, and the reason we brought her there, she had cut herself somehow and it looked like it was getting infected. So we brought her into emergency. And that was for the first time the kind of doctor said, hey, if we send your mother home, is there anybody there? And I come from a family of nurses. I come from a family of healthcare practitioners. And even though thought I was familiar with the system and so forth, I still wasn't prepared. So that kind of threw me for a loop. So I can only imagine what other families who don't have the understanding and the knowledge that I, had or thought I had about the healthcare system and what they go through in that period. Um, so Kylie, in terms of your experience in the field, um, who are the players? Like who are involved in this process? I was a child, of my mother, a grown child of my mother, and like who else is involved in the whole process for this?
Yeah, so obviously, like you said, there's seniors who are involved. They want independence. They don't want to feel like a burden, or they often don't ask for help or they wait too long to ask for help. But there's families who are also involved, much like your situation, your mom and then you. So I'm sure at the time you were working, managing your own children, that sandwich generation. And then suddenly you are coordinating appointments, medication, discharge, you're planning for your mom. But on top of that, there's also those unpaid caregivers who have that invisible load, the
Mm,
emotional exhaustion, the guilt when they can't do more, they're burnt out. And then on top of that, you have the practitioners, personal support workers, PSWs, or RPNs, registered practical nurses, and registered nurses, RNs, who are also burnt out. They're overscheduled and they want flexibility and stability, but they work in a field that doesn't always provide that because it is so unpredictable.
right,
So
absolutely.
the system isn't broken because people don't care. It's broken because it's not designed for activation.
Right, right. And activation, I guess you mean just being ready, because I wasn't ready when I went into the hospital that was going to be the moment where she was never going to go home. And you're right about that unpaid caregiver thing, and I'll never recall. And I guess I never classified myself as that, but I was a caregiver. I was a son, of course, and I was there to support her no matter what. But there was caregiving, needs as it went along, and as when she was first diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and it started to kick in, and it started to explain a lot in terms about her behavior. I recall her calling me, and she'd call once, and she's, "Hey, how you doing, JP?" Blah, blah, blah. And then we'd talk, and we'd say goodbye, and I'd get a call 5 minutes later. She'd call me, "Hey, JP, how you doing?" and so forth. And then I'd get another call, and this would happen over. And by the fifth call or sixth call or seventh call, she would say, "Why don't you ever call me?" And it was funny, but it was sad at the same time. But it caused a lot of stress in my life. Because one, I knew my mother was deteriorating and this disease, Alzheimer's, was taking over. But two, like her safety, if she was forgetting that she was speaking to me, what was happening to her when she was alone in her home. And she had always told us she wanted to be independent. That was her objective. And if she ever got to the point where she wasn't, cognizant of what was going on, or she's starting to lose her marbles, as she described it, put me in a home, or she jokingly said, put me in the pasture out back and let what happens happen. And that was just her nature. So we kind of knew where she was going. But you're right about the caregiver side. There's so much anxiety. There's so much stress that you go through. There's so much worry that it kind of occupies you. And you talked about the players, but I also like to add employers, as a big part of this, because they're employing unpaid caregivers. And
Absolutely.
you can imagine, I can imagine while I was working, where my mind was actually at. It wasn't necessarily at work all the time. It was thinking about, my mother, what was happening with my mother. So, and employers, employ unpaid caregivers. So, they're caught between, or the caregiver's caught between, taking care of their job, which obviously puts food on the table and so forth, but they're also taking care of their parents. And we can even go a stretch further and say, we're the sandwich generation. We're not only taking care of our parents, but we're taking care of our kids. And what stress does this add to us? What focus, do we have? And it's definitely, I hate to say, the job is secondary at that point. Right.
Whether you like it or not, yeah, it definitely
Mhm.
would take a back seat to what's going on and clouding your mind with your mom for sure.
Right.
And you can only imagine what everybody else is going through in the same employee or in the same profession. So, I
Hmm.
mean, it's
Yeah.
difficult. It's hard. It's a lot for everybody. And it's exactly why we're here to talk honestly and openly about the real challenges that are happening so people know they're not alone.
Right. So when it comes to caring, for your parent, for whoever it may be, what's missing today? Like
Hmm.
what we have a system that's set up, you would think, for an aging population, right? The demographics are definitely changing and creeping towards older, the baby boomers and so forth. And even Generation X are getting older. What's missing in care?
I think predictability.
Mm,
It's such an
mm,
unpredictable field. Care is so unpredictable. Everybody assumes or knows that eventually they're going to need care. But when that happens, no idea. You can
right.
assume it would happen next week. You could guess it's going to happen in a month, but really, you never know until it's too late. And it really comes down to that crisis moment of, I need care right now. And then what options do you have?
Mm,
Right?
mm,
So I think predictability is missing.
right.
And then also on the other side of it is autonomy for the practitioners, for those PSWs and the nurses and everybody involved in the field who is overworked and stressed out and burnt out because sometimes we forget that these practitioners, they also have lives outside of their job. And it goes right back to that conversation of employers. So traditional home care agencies who employ these practitioners, their practitioners are being burnt out in the field, worrying about their clients that they're caring for. But imagine the extra stress that they have if they were in that exact same situation. Their parent or their whoever, father-in-law, mother-in-law, whoever it is that they have to worry about too. So that's an added layer. And then
Right.
also the support for the unpaid caregivers is missing for sure. I
Right.
mean, how supported did you feel when you were that unpaid caregiver for your mom? when you
Right.
were put in this moment of, okay, what do I do next? What did you feel you had for support?
Yeah, just my siblings who were probably going through the same thing emotionally as I was.
Yeah,
Now, in hindsight, had I known, and there's a bunch of great organizations out there that
absolutely.
support caregivers. It's just gaining access. Had I known at the time, that would have been. And I'm not that type that would reach out for support. I don't know why, stubborn guy or whatever it is. But maybe I would have, because it was a lot emotionally. One, I was dealing with the fact that I was losing my mother, right? We were no longer going to have meaningful conversations. And I love to go over to her house and kind of sit down and, Mom, here's my issues, or this is what happened. I'm excited to share with you, to nothing, like to void. And that was emotionally really tough. And then on top of that, worrying about her safety. And then on top of that, just making sure what was going to happen. What did the future entail and so forth? Because we know Alzheimer's is a terrible thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it was a very stressful thing. And so, good to see that there are organizations out there that support the unpaired caregiver, which is absolutely needed, because the number, I think, it's like 4 million of us. I wasn't alone. I wasn't
Yeah.
unique. There's other individuals. And I talked to friends and I talked to colleagues and acquaintances and so forth, and they're going through something similar. So that support is there. Um, but what really, kind of threw it over the edge was the speed in which chaos came upon us. And when we took her to the emergency ward, or, emergency department for what we thought was an infection, turned out to be the last time that she was ever going to be at home, was at the speed of light. It was just moving. And so it was a question of, what could I have done to prepare for that moment? Emotionally, it's pretty tough when you know your mom is not going to be the same anymore, which you kind of knew already, but now it was kind of validated. And two, she wasn't going to live at the home that she lived at for the longest time. So it was quite an emotional process. But logistically, how I was going to care about that. Um, and I knew in the system there was options, right? You had retirement homes, you had long-term care homes. Of course, with Alzheimer's, you couldn't go into a retirement home unless they had supports there, which a lot of them are unassisted. And then you had home care agencies, so that you can extend the time. You have experience at a home care agency. What are some of the things that work well with agencies that they can help support these families?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing is if you have time to go through the process of setting up care and a schedule, home care agencies can provide that continuity of care for you. And that's very important during times of need to have the same person show up the same time every day that they're scheduled, or even the same team of caregivers or practitioners, whatever it may be. But you don't always have that time, right? Like, for example, you just said everything happened so quickly for you, like in the snap of a finger or snap of your fingers.
Mhm.
So it doesn't always work in a time of crisis. There's a huge gap of care because it takes time to implement. You have to go through the process of signing contracts on top of the minimum hours that you have to commit to, and whatever it may be that's so individualized to each agency because each is different. But you can be waiting for days to get care from an agency if you're going through that process of signing the contract, which doesn't help you in every situation when you're, say, being discharged from the hospital. If they want to discharge you today, you're not necessarily getting out today if you're trying to set up care with a traditional agency. So um,
So,
I think that leads us into why, or sort of the idea behind Caredara, is that activation. So we started asking those questions of what if care could activate when needed? What if you could get care right now, or families could prepare before crisis? And I think I'll let you chat a little bit about that, but
yeah, and perhaps that was born out of my experience with my mother, right? Like I said, is it human nature to procrastinate when you're trying when you may have to prepare for something that's not too that's going to be emotionally draining, like my mother. Like,
Mm.
I procrastinate for sure. I'm sure my sister said, we know it's coming, we know it's coming, we know it's coming. um
It's hard though,
but
right?
it's hard, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want to plan. Who wants to plan for that, go through that process and reach out and talk to somebody? We looked
Right.
at our options, geriatrician and that we spoke to, and they definitely shared the pamphlets and all of that.
Of
But
course.
making that phone call and saying, um, this is what's going to be happening. We don't know when it's going to happen. What do we need to have in place? And we actually did make some calls, to be fair, and they were very accommodating. And they said, when you're ready, reach back out to us, and we'll set something up. And we got to sign a contract. There was minimums and so forth. And I said, after it happened, where that I knew there was no looking back for my mother, that's when the kind of idea Caredara kind of came into play, is how can I have been ready so that when that doctor said to me, yeah, if we send your mother home, is there anybody to take care of her? And if there was something that we could do to kind of prepare people or prepare myself for that. And I think that's where Caredara, and I don't want to get into the tech about it, but
Yeah.
the technology could be a good way of doing that, so that I'm prepared, so that I just have to kind of tap a button and it's there. Um, so care activation, as a concept, kind of really came through, and we've had these conversations, right? Like,
Yeah.
imagine if we knew something was coming, we don't know when it's going to happen. What can we do to prepare for it, that so that we can activate it right away? And I know
Mm.
activation is a fancy word and all that jazz, but it is really important in the moment, having lived it, that you kind of, oh my gosh, a million things ran through my mind that I had to do. And if you can eliminate
Yeah.
that. From your perspective, why did you what made you think about Care and the reason why it needs to exist?
Honestly, I think just hearing so many lived stories, I mean, for me personally, I watched my parents go through a similar process that you went through with my grandparents, and it's hard, especially being on the other end of the sandwich generation, so or one side of it, I guess. So
Yeah.
watching my parents have to sort of juggle caring for their parents and then also ensuring that me and my siblings are set to grow up.
Mhm.
Um, but then as I got older and started becoming more interested in gerontology and then joining the healthcare fields and home healthcare specifically, having these conversations with people every day and taking that call of someone looking for care or trying to set up care in such a scary, stressful, overwhelming moment, and they have no idea what to do.
Right.
There's no direction. There's resources, but it's easy to read a piece of paper and read no emotion and think, "Oh, I'm so alone in this." So I think that being able to help people in a way that they don't even know that they need help. So basically providing that platform to
Mhm.
help them to prepare, have their ducks in a row, and be ready without being too overly aggressive because we're here when you need us,
Right.
essentially at Caredara.
Yeah.
And then when they need to activate, we're there as well. So I think that's sort of where it stemmed from for me. It's just
Yeah.
hearing so many lived stories.
Right.
So,
Right. And I think when we got together and we were chatting, it resonated for both of us, us going through it personally and then seeing it from other perspectives. From a workforce development, human resource side, which is my background, having a care network ready. My wife's a nurse and she's on call. And so when
mhm,
they need her at the hospital, she's activated. And so how
exactly.
can we kind of take that model and apply it to individuals' lives in the community that are need somebody on call, so that when they need help and they're in crisis, somebody's there to do it. So I think developing that component of it, the care network, is really critical. So having practitioners tapping into practitioners, and you mentioned practitioners before, them going through their own experience, but giving them the flexibility of a couple of things. And I think one, giving back to their community. You don't become a nurse or a PSW because you love the money. You become a PSW or a nurse because that's who you are. You want to give back. And so I think, early on we found, you know, uh, a group of individuals, a group of professionals that were willing to contribute in any way they can. And so that kind of led to, well, if we have this network of practitioners who are just by their very nature willing to help out in crises and are compassionate or empathetic, how do we set up a structure where they can be available when care is needed? And really, that's the guts behind Caredara is having a set of practitioners who have the clinical skills, who have the empathy and the compassion, supporting them, developing them, and making sure that they're ready when care is needed. And then on the flip side, in my situation, I run into a crisis, the inevitable happens, knew it was going to happen, didn't know when it was going to happen, but wasn't really prepared for it. But
Hmm.
getting prepared for it and then knowing that there's this network of practitioners that when I need them, they're going to be there. And I think that's a powerful thing. And we've had countless chats about this and why we exist and what we're all about. And just trying to meet the reality of the current situation. And although home care agencies have their place, we said, hey, let's support them as much as we can. But what happens in that crisis moment when I was trying to stabilize a situation, but couldn't right away because the resources weren't there to do it? Hence the reason for creating an infrastructure, a care network that allows people to kind of tap into it right away, stabilize, and then go in the right direction for longer term care.
Absolutely. And I think the biggest thing that we're trying to do is we're not trying to replace care. We're not trying to replace agencies or
Mhm.
long-term care facilities. We're simply just trying to remove that panic in such an overwhelming time and just
Absolutely.
ease the process a little bit to hopefully over time fill that gap.
Right. So why, in my case, I'm surrounded by health practitioners. So, one conversation or another we're talking about, but that's not everybody, right? I have
Mhm.
friends that are connected to healthcare through me, and I'm not even directly care. I got like I'm a conduit to that. But why aren't conversations or why conversations about care happen so late? What's the reasoning behind that, do you think?
I think we could sit here and try to dissect that question all day, but the reality is acceptance is hard.
Mm.
And accepting that eventually the time may or may not come is hard for a lot of people.
Right.
So that could be a factor. Um, Simply not being ready to, not knowing your options, not knowing what's out there.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Well,
it's difficult. It's also difficult. I don't have a straightforward answer for you, in my opinion.
from a guy's perspective, I just don't like talking about negative things, right? I don't
Yeah.
like talking about things that I know that are not going to turn out in a positive way. Like with my mother's diagnosis of Alzheimer's, it was only going to go down. And I'd rather not talk about it because it's accepting that it's going down,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. I think for me too, my parents are aging, I'm aging myself. I'm not thinking about that right now,
Right.
right? Like it's it's not something that you think about on the daily until something happens, until you have that first, oh, my mom had a fall, or oh, my dad's losing his memory a little bit, or he forgot his keys, whatever it may be. You don't think about it until it's right in front of you almost, right? So
Sure.
I guess planning for that and realizing that readiness and being ready is an act of love. It's something that you need to
Hmm.
prepare for, whether you like it or not, because that's just. I mean, hopefully it's not the way that it goes for everybody, but the reality is that it does go that way for everybody.
The funny thing too is, if it was up to my mother, God bless her, she's just a stubborn woman. She had to do everything herself. She was proud. She didn't accept failure, and she wouldn't have reached out for help. But I
Mhm.
think you said a powerful thing, like, the notion of readiness. And I think that was a driving force behind creating Caredara is, making it simple for people to be ready when the
Mhm.
time comes, when that crisis happens. Because again, it's unpredictable. So
Yeah.
let's talk about, this was kind of exploration of, some of the things that we're going to look at in this podcast. Let's talk about what's to come, as we continue to do these different episodes in this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we want to sort of talk about everything home care, everything um, care in general. So, some of the topics that we're going to discuss is how to prepare before a crisis. That would be sort of creating that readiness before activation. And then emotional resilience in caregiving. Um,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
huge. Practitioner experience, the future of flexible care, what that can look like, what a world of what the direction that care can go.
Mhm.
Um, Ideally, not realistically always. And then what independence really means. And then how families can think differently about support. So there's a lot of topics we want to talk about. There's a lot of directions we can and will go. I'm sure we'll change a million times, but
Yeah.
just making people feel seen and heard and helping people realize that they're not alone in this process.
Which is huge. And I will
Mhm.
say in you know starting up Caredara, I've met so many people, so through so many organizations. The resources out there, it's phenomenal what's available. And I also add in terms of those topics is having guest speakers on as well, and
Absolutely.
them to the folks that are going to be listening to that, because there is such a huge amount of resources. It's just kind of getting access to that, which would be
Hmm.
helpful. But I especially like the fact that you talked about that emotional resilience. And again, from a guy's perspective, that is something I don't want to talk about, but it's so important to talk about it, especially as you go through these things. Because one thing for sure that's inevitable, like you said, we're all getting older, and some people are going to have smooth sailing through it, others are going to have bumpy roads, and it's dealing with those bumpy roads that are key. And so I hope to kind of explore that, wholeheartedly through these different podcasts. So looking forward to having conversation with you, having conversation with, experts in the field or just people that have lived experience, whether they're, a senior or whether they're a caregiver taking care of somebody. So all exciting things to come.
Absolutely. And it's funny you say the acceptance because the other day I was asked the question, um, what is the best way to prepare for aging? And the
Hmm.
only response I have to that is acceptance. It's
Mm,
inevitable. You have to accept that you're aging and everyone around you is aging.
right.
And so the sooner you accept it, the happier you'll be through the process, ideally. So I think if you're a senior, a daughter, a son, a nurse, a caregiver, a practitioner, PSW, whatever it is, someone quietly holding it all together, this is for you. This podcast is for you.
Excellent.
And
Agree.
Care doesn't
And
usually
just a
show up.
cat. Go ahead,
Sorry,
sir.
go ahead.
I was just and just as a caveat too, like I'm not an expert in psychology. I'm not an expert in a
Me
lot of
either.
things, but this is just about kind of sharing our experience,
Exactly.
why we think dealing with these crises is so important for families because we saw firsthand or we experienced firsthand what it's like to go through that, and just kind of sharing and getting out there. So I look.
Absolutely. Well, we'll leave it there. I'll close it off with care doesn't usually show up when it's convenient. It shows up when it's needed. And when it does, it's a lot. We care. So thank you for joining us today on It's a Lot, Let's Talk.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much for tuning into It's a Lot, Let's Talk. We hope today's conversation was helpful, honest, and maybe even a little comforting. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to like us on Facebook at Caredara, follow us on Instagram at Caredara App, connect with us on LinkedIn at Caredara to stay up to date and join the conversation. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment, share your thoughts, or just say hi. And don't forget, new episodes are coming soon. If you want to take action on today's conversation, you can scan the QR code in the bottom left to plan for readiness, access helpful resources, and stay prepared. Thanks again for listening. Until next time, take care, and remember, you're not alone in this.